Welcome, dear friends, to Mystic Bedtime Stories. I'm so glad you've chosen to spend this evening with us, here in this quiet corner of the world, where ancient tales drift through the darkness like whispers on a gentle breeze. If you're new to our channel, you've found a sanctuary for the stories that time forgot, the civilizations that once breathed life into distant lands, and the mysteries that still echo through mountain valleys and forgotten forests. Here at Mystic Bedtime Stories, we believe that the most profound rest comes not from emptying the mind, but from filling it with wonder. Each night, we journey together through the mists of history, walking alongside people who lived and loved and built magnificent things in places that now seem touched by magic. Our stories are crafted for those who find peace in the contemplation of ages past, who feel their souls stir when they imagine standing where ancients once stood. Tonight, we travel to a realm suspended between earth and sky, where clouds cling to mountain slopes like the breath of sleeping giants, and where stone fortresses emerge from morning mist as if conjured by dreams. We journey to the high Andes of northern Peru to walk among a people known throughout history as the warriors of the clouds. Can you feel it already? That thin, cool air of altitude where each breath comes precious and clear, where the boundary between earth and heaven grows soft, and ancient spirits seem to move just beyond the edge of sight. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already, and let yourself drift with me to a place where time moves differently, where the modern world falls away like morning shadows retreating before the sun. Picture yourself standing on a narrow mountain path 3,000 feet above the valleys below. The air around you shimmers with moisture, not quite rain, not quite mist, but something in between, the very essence of clouds made tangible. Pine and cedar trees emerge and disappear in this ethereal veil, their branches heavy with moss that has never known a dry day. The silence here is different from any silence you've ever known. It's not empty, but full of the whispered conversations between wind and leaves, between stone and sky. This is the cloud forest of the Andes, a world apart from our own, where an extraordinary people once made their home. They called themselves the Chachapoya, though that name came to us through the voices of their conquerors. What they truly called themselves in the privacy of their mountain halls, in the intimacy of their own tongue, we may never know. But the Inca, when they spoke of these mountain dwellers with grudging respect, called them the Sachapuyos, the cloud people. And later, when Spanish chroniclers tried to capture their essence in words, they became known as the warriors of the clouds. Who were they really, these people who chose to build their lives in a realm where earth meets sky? What drew them to these mist-shrouded peaks, so high that eagles nest below their doorsteps? What dreams filled their nights? What hopes carried them through the thin air of dawn after dawn in their mountain kingdom? Tonight, we'll discover together the answers to these questions. Or perhaps more accurately, we'll discover the beautiful mystery that surrounds their absence of answers. For the Chachapoya left behind no written words, no scrolls or tablets to speak their thoughts across the centuries. Instead, they left something far more evocative. They left their stones, their bones, their works of art, and their choices about where and how to live. They left us a puzzle written in architecture and artifacts, a story told in the very bones of the mountains they called home. As we begin this journey together, I want you to imagine that you're not merely listening to a story about people who lived long ago. Instead, imagine that you're remembering, somewhere in the deepest part of your being, in that place where all human memory is connected across time. You carry within you the echo of what it was like to wake each morning in a house built of stone, high above the world, where your first glimpse of each new day was the sight of clouds moving past your window like slow, white rivers in the sky. Feel yourself settling deeper into comfort now, letting the tensions of this modern day dissolve like mist in morning sunlight. Your breathing is becoming slower, deeper, matching the rhythm of those ancient mountain mornings when time moved to the cadence of seasons rather than seconds, when the most pressing urgency was the gentle need to tend crops terraced into impossible slopes, or to weave another row in a textile that would outlast empires. The Chachapoya lived for over 1,000 years in their cloud kingdom. 1,000 years. Let that span of time settle into your imagination. 40 generations of children learned to walk on paths carved into mountainsides. 40 generations of artists shaped clay with their hands. 40 generations of builders placed stone upon stone until massive fortresses rose from the mist like dreams made solid. And now, as you rest here in the comfort of your own space, you're about to become part of their story. Not as an observer looking back through time, but as a spirit traveling through the mists that connect all moments, all places, all souls who have ever gazed up at stars and wondered what mysteries they hold. The great fortress of Kuélap awaits us, its circular towers catching the first light of an ancient dawn. The sacred sarcophagi hang on their cliff faces, guardians of the dead who watch over the living with eyes that see across centuries. The weaver's looms wait silent in the darkness, their final threads still holding the pattern that was interrupted by the footsteps of history. Let your breathing slow now. Let your heartbeat find its most peaceful rhythm, and prepare to walk with me along paths that wind through time itself. For tonight, you are not bound by the limitations of when you were born or where you find yourself. Tonight, you are a citizen of all times, a wanderer in the realm where all stories live. Where the cloud warriors still move through their mist-wrapped world, still build their impossible fortresses, still weave their bright textiles under stars that shine the same light they shone 1,000 years ago. The mist is gathering around us now, soft and welcoming as the gentlest blanket. Can you smell the pine and cedar, the moss and mountain flowers? Can you feel the coolness of altitude on your skin, the way the air carries sounds differently in the thin atmosphere of the heights? Our journey begins now as we step onto the cloud-touched paths of the Chachapoya, where every stone has a story, every silence holds a secret, and every breath of mountain air carries whispers of a people who chose to live their lives as close to heaven as human feet could climb. Let us begin with the land itself, the extraordinary realm where the cloud warriors made their home, where mountains pierce the belly of clouds and ancient secrets sleep in mist. Breathe with me now, slowly and deeply, as we ascend together through layers of time and altitude. Feel yourself rising, not just through space, but through the very essence of what it means to dwell between earth and sky. We're climbing now, always climbing, our feet finding purchase on paths that wind through a landscape that exists nowhere else on Earth. This is the cloud forest of the northern Andes, a realm that defies the simple categories we use to organize our world. It is neither fully tropical nor temperate, neither entirely wet nor completely dry. neither wholly civilized nor purely wild. It exists in that liminal space between definitions, just as its people existed between the known world below and the celestial realm above. Picture yourself now on a morning when the mist clings so close that you cannot see your own hand extended before you. This is not the thin, ephemeral fog that burns away with the first touch of sunlight in lower lands. This is cloud mist, substantial and enduring, a living presence that moves with purpose through valleys and across ridgelines. It pools in hollows like liquid silver, streams through mountain passes like slow waterfalls, and wraps around the massive stone walls that rise from these heights like the gentle embrace of ancient gods. The elevation here ranges from 8,000 to 12,000 feet above the distant sea, altitudes where the air itself becomes precious, where each breath must be savored and held a moment longer than usual. At these heights, the boundary between cloud and forest dissolves entirely. Trees emerge from the mist like thoughts materializing from dreams. Cedars and pines, their branches heavy with bromeliads and orchids, create a canopy so thick with moisture that water drips constantly, a gentle percussion that has marked the rhythm of days and seasons for millennia. Can you feel it, this different quality of air? How it seems to hold more than ordinary air holds. Here, moisture is not just humidity, but presence, not just weather, but character. The Chachapoya learned to read this mist like we read the faces of loved ones, understanding its moods, its promises, its warnings. When clouds gathered thick around their mountain homes, they knew the rains would come gentle and sustained. When the mist pulled back to reveal the distant peaks, they understood that the dry season would offer them clear days for travel and trade. But it was more than practical knowledge that connected them to this aerial realm. In the cloud forest, the very air seems to pulse with possibility. Sounds carry differently here, muffled and then amplified in ways that create an otherworldly acoustic landscape. A footstep on wet stone might echo for seconds, while a shout might be swallowed entirely by the mist just 20 paces away. In this environment, the Chachapoya developed an acute sensitivity to the subtle, learning to navigate by the feel of air currents on their skin, by the particular way sound bounced off invisible cliff faces, by the scent of specific flowers that bloomed in different elevations and seasons. The terrain itself defies easy description. Imagine standing on what appears to be solid ground, only to discover that you're actually perched on a narrow ridge with 1,000-foot drops hidden in the mist on either side. Valleys plunge so dramatically that you could throw a stone from your doorway and not hear it land. Mountains rise so abruptly that their peaks disappear into perpetual cloud cover, creating the illusion that the earth simply continues upward forever, merging seamlessly with sky. This is a landscape that shapes not just where people build their homes, but how they think about existence itself. Here, the Chachapoya learned to live with mystery as a constant companion. They couldn't see the full scope of their world from any single vantage point, couldn't map their territory with the confidence of people who live in open plains or gentle hills. Instead, they developed an intimate, almost mystical relationship with the unknown. They built their lives around the understanding that some things remain hidden, that mist is as much a part of reality as stone, that the invisible is as important as what can be touched and measured. The soil beneath their feet told its own story of this unique realm, rich beyond imagining, Fed by centuries of leaves and flowers falling from the canopy above, watered by the constant gentle precipitation of cloud mist, it could grow almost anything. But the Chachapoya had to learn to farm on slopes so steep that their agricultural terraces seemed to defy gravity itself. They carved horizontal gardens into mountainsides that rise at angles that would challenge modern engineers, creating ribbon-like platforms of fertile earth that follow the contours of ridgelines like green staircases ascending toward heaven. Standing in one of these ancient terraces now, you would find yourself surrounded by walls of fitted stone so precisely cut that no mortar was needed to hold them in place. The stones themselves seemed to breathe with the mist, their surfaces dark with moisture, green with moss, alive with the slow conversation between mineral and moisture that creates the very foundation of cloud forest life. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this landscape is its silence. Not the empty silence of dead places, but the profound, expectant silence of a world holding its breath. In the cloud forest, sound becomes sacred. The drip of condensation from leaves creates a rhythm more ancient than human music. The distant call of a bird carries meanings that seem to echo in the very bones. The whisper of wind moving through mist speaks in languages that predate words. The Chachapoya learn to live within this silence, to become part of it rather than trying to break it. Their footsteps grew soft on mountain paths. Their voices took on the modulated tones of people who understand that loud sounds are not just intrusive, but somehow sacrilegious in a place where the earth itself speaks in whispers. At night, when the mist thickens and the already limited visibility disappears entirely, the cloud forest becomes a realm of pure sensation. Temperature drops can be felt on the skin like gentle fingers. The scent of night-blooming flowers grows so intense it seems almost visible. The sound of one's own breathing becomes a meditation, each exhale adding to the moisture that will become tomorrow's morning mist. This, then, was the world that shaped the Chachapoya, day by day, generation by generation, century by century. Not a world that demanded they conquer it, but one that invited them to join it, to become part of its rhythms, to learn its languages of mist and stone, wind and silence. Feel yourself now as if you were one of them, waking in a stone house built into the curve of a mountainside. Your first sensation, the cool touch of cloud mist drifting through your window, carrying with it the scent of orchids and cedar. The promise of a day that will unfold according to the mountain's own sense of time. Your feet would find the smooth stones of your floor, worn smooth by generations of morning risings, and you would step outside into a world that existed nowhere else, belonged to no other people, followed no other rules than those written in the ancient conversation between clouds and peaks. The Chachapoya didn't just live in the cloud forest. They became cloud forest people, their very thoughts shaped by mist, their dreams textured by the feel of thin air and the constant awareness of vast spaces both visible and hidden. They learned to find comfort in mystery, to build their lives around the understanding that some questions don't need answers, that some landscapes are meant to be inhabited rather than understood, that home can be a feeling as much as a place. And in learning to live as citizens of the clouds, they developed ways of being human that were as unique and irreplaceable as the ecosystem that surrounded them. They became people of the mist, builders in stone, weavers of dreams, warriors who could appear and disappear like fog itself, leaving only the echo of their presence in the memories of mountains. As we rest here now in the imagined comfort of their world, breathing the thin, precious air of their heights, wrapped in the gentle coolness of their perpetual mist, we begin to understand how a landscape can become more than a backdrop for life. Here, environment and identity merged so completely that to know the Chachapoya, we must first know their clouds, their stones, their silence, their extraordinary choice to make their home in a realm where earth and heaven meet. The mist is growing thicker around us now, and in its depths, we begin to hear the whispers of stories yet untold, the echoes of voices that once called these mountain paths home. From this landscape of dreams, from this foundation of cloud and stone, emerges the question that will guide our journey deeper into their world. Where did these remarkable people come from? And what ancient stories do they carry in their bones? Listen now to the sound of your own breathing, slow and steady, as we journey backward through the mists of time. Each breath takes us deeper into mystery, into the realm where history dissolves into legend, where facts transform into the kind of truth that lives in the heart rather than in written records. For the story of where the Chachapoya came from is not a story written in books, but one whispered by stones, carried in the wind, preserved in the very bones of the mountains they called home. Close your eyes more deeply now and imagine that you can hear the voices of ancient storytellers, their words carried on the evening air of 1,000 years ago. Picture yourself sitting beside a fire built in the shelter of massive stone walls, the flames casting dancing shadows that seem to move with lives of their own. The elders speak in low voices, their words punctuated by the gentle drumming of rain on stone. And they tell the stories their own grandparents told them, stretching back through generations like an unbroken chain of whispered memories. But what stories did they tell? What did the Chachapoya themselves believe about their origins? This is where our journey becomes one of imagination, guided by fragments, of dreams built upon the pieces left behind when a culture fades from the world like mist fading at sunrise. The truth is that the Chachapoya left behind no written chronicles of their beginnings. They carved no origin stories into stone tablets, painted no creation myths on pottery, wove no genealogies into their magnificent textiles. Like their beloved mist, their early history exists in a realm between the visible and the invisible, known and yet unknowable, present and yet always just beyond the reach of our understanding. What we do know comes to us through the voices of others, like hearing a conversation through the walls of time. The first whispers reach us from the Inca, those master empire builders who encountered the Chachapoya in the 15th century and found in them a people unlike any they had conquered before. In the careful Quechua words of Inca chroniclers, preserved like flowers pressed between the pages of Spanish colonial documents, we catch glimpses of how these mountain dwellers appeared to eyes that had grown accustomed to submission. The Inca called them Sachapuyos, the people of the trees, though whether this referred to their forest homeland or to some deeper connection with the living wood of their mountain realm, we can only wonder. But there was something in the way the Inca spoke of them that suggested not just respect, but a kind of puzzled admiration. These were not people who fit easily into the categories the Inca used to organize their world. Listen to what the Inca remembered about them. They were tall, taller than most of the peoples of the Andes, with skin described as lighter than their neighbors, and hair that sometimes carried the colors of autumn leaves rather than the deep black typical of Andean peoples. The Spanish chroniclers who later recorded these Inca memories spoke of them as if they were describing beings from another realm entirely, people who seemed to belong more to the mists than to solid earth. But here, in the gentle darkness of this evening, we can imagine other possibilities, other truths that live deeper than the observations of conquerors. Perhaps the Chachapoya were tall, not just in body, but in spirit, carrying themselves with the particular dignity that comes from living always in the presence of vast spaces and infinite skies. Perhaps their skin seemed different because it had been kissed by mountain light filtered through eternal clouds, taking on the pearl-like quality of people who breathe mist more often than clear air. And their hair, described as sometimes light, sometimes carrying unusual colors. Might this have been the result of generations spent in the high-altitude sun, that thin, intense light that touches mountain peaks with colors unknown in the valleys below? Or perhaps, in the privacy of our imagination, we can wonder if there was something more mystical at work, some deep connection with their aerial realm that left its mark not just on their culture, but on their very beings. Some scholars have whispered of even more intriguing possibilities. Could the Chachapoya have descended from peoples who came from across the vast Pacific, carried on ocean currents and trade winds to the shores of South America centuries before any European dreamed of Western seas? Their weaving patterns, with their intricate geometric designs, seem to echo textiles found on distant Pacific islands. Their architectural techniques, the way they fitted stones without mortar, speaks to knowledge that might have traveled on paths more ancient than any we can map. But tonight, as you rest in the comfortable darkness, breathing slowly and deeply, perhaps it matters less where they came from than how they became who they were. For the Chachapoya, like all truly remarkable peoples, were shaped not just by their origins, but by their choices. Not just by their blood, but by their dreams. Not just by where they began, but by where they decided to make their home. Imagine for a moment that they were people drawn to mystery itself, souls who felt most at home in places where questions outnumbered answers. Picture them as wanderers who climbed higher and higher through the Andes, not because they were fleeing something below, but because they were seeking something above. Perhaps they were people who looked at the play of clouds around mountain peaks and recognized it as their natural element, who heard in the whisper of wind through high passes the sound of their true language. In this imagining, their origins become less important than their destiny. They became the Chachapoya not because of who their ancestors were, but because they chose to live between earth and sky, to build their lives in the realm where solid ground gives way to eternal mist, where the practical concerns of daily existence must always be balanced against the profound mystery of dwelling in the clouds. The Spanish chroniclers who first wrote about them preserved fragments of what might have been their own stories. They spoke of the Chachapoya as people who claimed descent from the condors, those magnificent birds who soar at altitudes where human lungs struggle to find enough air to sustain life. Whether this was literal belief or metaphorical truth, it speaks to a people who understood themselves as belonging to the realm above. Citizens of the vertical world where air grows thin and perspectives shift with altitude. But perhaps the most beautiful possibility is the one that requires no historical documentation, no archaeological evidence, no scholarly theories. Perhaps the Chachapoya were simply people who, generation after generation, chose to live as if the boundary between earth and heaven were permeable, as if human beings were meant to dwell in the spaces where clouds are born, as if home could be a feeling that existed between the solid and the ethereal. In the end, their truest origin might have been this. They were people who looked up at the mist-wrapped peaks of the northern Andes and felt not challenge or obstacle, but invitation. They were souls who heard in the thin air of high altitudes not limitation, but freedom, who saw in the constant presence of clouds not barrier, but embrace. And so tonight, as you settle deeper into rest, breathing the imagined air of their mountain realm, you become part of their continuing story. For in choosing to listen to their whispers across the centuries, in allowing your dreams to carry you to their cloud-touched peaks, you join the long line of souls who have been drawn to the mystery of the Chachapoya, who have felt the pull of that extraordinary question. What would it be like to live as a citizen of the clouds? Their origins, whether in distant islands or nearby valleys, whether in the flight paths of condors or the dreams of mountain-dwelling ancestors, matter less than this. They became people of the mist, builders of impossible fortresses, weavers of dreams that still hang in the air of the Andes, like morning clouds waiting for the sun. The fire in our imagined hearth burns lower now, its light growing softer as the stories of origins give way to dreams of stone and construction. For ahead of us, rising from the mist like thoughts becoming solid, waits the greatest mystery the Chachapoya left behind, the massive fortress of Kuélap, their stone poem written against the sky, their answer to the question of how human hands might touch the realm of clouds. Let your breathing grow even deeper now as we ascend through layers of time and altitude toward something that should not exist, yet does. Feel yourself climbing, always climbing, your footsteps finding purchase on stones placed by hands that have been dust for centuries. The mist parts before you like curtains drawing back to reveal the impossible. And there, emerging from the clouds like a dream made manifest in limestone and defiance, rises Kuélap. Rest your mind in wonder as we approach this marvel together. Kuélap, the great fortress that the world forgot, that slept in its wrapping of mist and jungle for 400 years, while empires rose and fell in the valleys below. Kuélap, which archaeologists call the Machu Picchu of the North, though it is far older, far larger, and in its way far more mysterious than its famous southern cousin. Close your eyes and let yourself feel the thin air at 10,000 feet above the sea, where each breath must be treasured, where the effort of building anything more than a simple shelter would challenge the strongest heart and the most determined spirit. Yet here, on a mountaintop so narrow that clouds drift past at eye level, the Chachapoya chose to build not just a home, but a fortress, not just a settlement, but a stone symphony that stretches for more than half a mile along the ridge, its walls rising 40 feet toward heaven, massive beyond imagining, enduring beyond reason. Picture yourself now standing before the main entrance, that narrow passage barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. This is not the grand gateway of a people who wished to welcome strangers. This is a passage designed by minds that understood siege warfare, that knew the value of controlling every footstep that approached their mountain kingdom. The walls funnel visitors into this single point of access, and as you pass through, You can feel the weight of centuries pressing down from the massive stones above. But step through that narrow doorway, and the true miracle of Kuélap reveals itself. You find yourself in a world that defies every expectation of what ancient people could accomplish on a mountaintop touched by clouds. Before you stretches a vast oval platform longer than 6 football fields placed end to end, wider than 3 placed side by side, all of it level, all of it built from stones fitted so precisely that rain cannot find passage between them. Wind cannot shake their foundations. Time itself seems powerless to disturb their ancient conversation with the sky. The outer walls that contain this impossible platform rise like the sides of a great stone ship sailing through eternal clouds. 40 feet high in places, built from blocks of limestone, each weighing more than a modern automobile, they were raised by people who had no wheels, no pulleys, no beasts of burden, no metal tools harder than bronze. They had only their hands, their ingenuity, and a vision so compelling that generations of builders dedicated their lives to making it real. Feel yourself walking now across the great platform, your footsteps echoing softly on stones that have felt the passage of countless feet over countless seasons. The air here holds a different quality than the air outside the walls. Within Kuélap, you are truly dwelling in the realm of clouds. Mist flows through this space like slow water, pooling in the circular foundations of ancient houses, drifting around the mysterious round towers that rise from the platform like stone prayers offered to the sky. These towers, these enigmatic stone cylinders that dot the platform like monuments to forgotten purposes, speak to us across the centuries in a language we struggle to translate. Some rise 20 feet above the platform, their walls perfectly circular, their stones fitted with the precision of jewelers working in granite. What were they? Storage chambers for the precious grains that sustained life at this altitude? Temples where ceremonies were performed to honor the cloud spirits? Astronomical observatories where priest astronomers tracked the movements of stars visible only in the thin air above the mist line? Walk among them now in your imagination, letting your fingers trail across stones worn smooth by mountain weather, feeling the substance of mystery made manifest. Each tower holds its secrets close, reveals nothing of its purpose save the profound care with which it was constructed. They are questions built in stone, riddles that invite contemplation rather than demanding solution. But perhaps that is the most beautiful truth about Kuélap. It exists not to provide answers, but to inspire wonder. Standing within its walls, breathing the thin air of its impossible altitude, you begin to understand that the Chachapoya built this place not merely for practical purposes, but as an expression of something far more profound. They built it as a declaration that human beings could create beauty even in the most challenging places. That architecture could be prayer, that stone could be raised not just to shelter bodies, but to elevate spirits. Consider the dedication required to build such a place. Every stone had to be quarried from the mountain itself, shaped by hand, carried by human strength to its appointed place in the great design. Every day's work was performed in air so thin that each physical effort demanded extra breath, extra rest, extra determination. Every season brought new challenges. Rains that could wash away months of careful construction, winds that could topple improperly balanced stones, cold that could crack the hands of workers and freeze the mortar between the blocks. Yet they persevered, generation after generation, each adding their labor to a vision that none would live to see completed. Fathers placed stones that their sons would build upon. Mothers carried water that would mix the mortar their daughters would spread. Children played among the growing walls that would shelter their grandchildren's grandchildren. Kuélap was not built in a single lifetime, or even in several lifetimes. It was built across centuries, a collaborative dream that required the sustained devotion of an entire civilization. And as it grew, stone by stone, season by season, it became more than a fortress. It became the physical manifestation of the Chachapoya soul, their answer to the question of how human beings should live when they choose to dwell among the clouds. It became proof that practical necessity and transcendent beauty could be partners in creation, that defense could be poetry, that walls could be prayers. From your position on the great platform, you can see for endless miles when the mist permits. Across valleys so deep, they seem to fall away into other worlds. Toward peaks so distant, they merge with the clouds that gave them birth. The Chachapoya, who walked these stones each day, lived with perspective that few human beings have ever known. Their daily lives were conducted against a backdrop of infinity, their most ordinary tasks performed in the presence of the sublime. And at night, when the mist thickened and the already limited world contracted to the warm glow of fires built in the circular foundations of their houses, Kuélap became something else entirely. It became an island of human warmth floating in a sea of cloud and darkness, a place where the boundaries between earth and sky, between solid ground and eternal mist, between the temporal and the timeless, dissolved entirely. Picture yourself now as one of them, settling into sleep in a circular house built into the platform of Kuélap. Your last conscious sensation, the sound of wind moving through the great stone walls with a voice like distant singing. Your dreams would be touched by altitude, colored by the thin air that makes sleep deeper and visions more vivid. You would dream of condors soaring at eye level past your window, of stars so close you could reach up and pluck them from the darkness, of ancestors who had become one with the mist and moved through the fortress like gentle spirits, tending fires that never quite went out. And perhaps in the deepest part of those dreams, you would understand what the builders of Kuélap truly accomplished. They created a place where human beings could live as citizens of both earth and sky, where the practical demands of defense and shelter were met without sacrificing the soul's need for beauty and transcendence. They proved that even in the most challenging environment on Earth, people could build not just to survive, but to soar. The stones of Kuélap still stand today, still catch the morning light as it burns through mountain mist, still shelter the circular foundations where families once gathered around their fires. Time has softened their edges, but has not shaken their foundations. Weather has clothed them in moss and orchids, but has not disturbed their perfect placement. The great fortress continues its ancient dialogue with clouds and sky, its stone voice still whispering the same truths it has whispered for 1,000 years. That human hands can touch heaven, that human hearts can build dreams that outlast empires, that human spirits can choose to dwell in the realm where earth meets infinity. As we rest now in the imagined comfort of these ancient walls, breathing the thin, precious air of their altitude, wrapped in the gentle coolness of their eternal mist, we begin to understand that Kuélap was more than a fortress, more than an architectural marvel, more than a defensive position. It was the physical expression of a way of seeing the world, a stone meditation on what it means to live between earth and sky, a lasting testament to the truth that human beings can create beauty even in the most impossible places. But the builders of Kuélap were more than architects and engineers. They were artists and dreamers, people who understood that life requires more than strong walls and strategic positions. Within the safety of their mountain fortress, they created works of such delicate beauty that they seemed to have been woven from mist itself, crafted from the very essence of clouds. Breathe deeply now, and let your imagination carry you beyond the great stone walls of Kuélap, into the intimate spaces where the Chachapoya lived their daily lives, where they transformed the practical necessities of survival into expressions of profound beauty. Feel yourself growing smaller, more focused, moving from the grand scale of fortress walls to the delicate scale of human hands, creating objects meant to last not just for seasons, but for centuries. In the soft light of an ancient morning, picture yourself entering one of the circular houses built into the platform of the great fortress. The walls around you are made of the same precise stonework as the fortress itself, but here the stones are smaller, more intimate, fitted together with a care that speaks not just of skill, but of love. The floor beneath your feet is smooth river stone, each piece selected and placed with the attention usually reserved for jewelry. This is not merely shelter, but home, not merely function, but art. Your eyes adjust to the gentle dimness, and you begin to see the true magic of Chachapoya domestic life. Hanging from wooden pegs driven into spaces left deliberately between the stones are textiles that seem to capture light and hold it. Fabrics woven with such skill that they appear to shimmer even in the shadowed interior of the house. These are not mere coverings for warmth, though they serve that purpose in the cool mountain air. They are poems written in thread, stories told in patterns that speak a visual language more complex than any alphabet. Move closer to one of these textile masterpieces and feel your breath catch at the intricacy of its construction. The base fabric is woven from cotton grown in the warm valleys below and carried up the mountain paths by traders who understood that beauty was worth the effort of transport. But worked into this foundation are threads of alpaca wool, so fine it feels like captured cloud beneath your fingertips, dyed in colors that seem impossible in a world without chemistry books or industrial processes. Here is red so deep it appears to hold fire within its depths, derived from cochineal insects gathered from cactus plants that grow in the desert regions days of travel from these mountain heights. There is blue as profound as the sky seen through thin air. Created from indigo plants cultivated in hidden gardens carved into impossible slopes. Yellow gleams like mountain sunlight, extracted from flowers that bloom only at certain elevations during specific seasons, each dye lot a collaboration between human knowledge and the gifts of the natural world. But it is not just the colors that astonish, it is the patterns themselves. Geometric designs of such mathematical precision that modern computers would be challenged to replicate them, yet created by hands working without rulers or templates, guided only by an aesthetic sense refined across generations of weavers. Spirals that seem to move even when you hold perfectly still, creating the optical illusion that the fabric breathes with a life of its own. Interlocking triangles that form patterns within patterns, each level of design revealing new complexities as your eyes learn to read the visual syntax of Chachapoya art. These textiles were more than decoration, more than craft, more than even art as we usually understand it. They were portable libraries, carrying in their patterns the accumulated knowledge of a people who wrote their history not on paper or stone tablets, but in the very structure of their weaving. Each textile told stories, preserved genealogies, recorded astronomical observations, maintained the cultural memory of a civilization that chose to encode its deepest truths in beauty rather than in words. Picture now the weaver who created the textile you hold, sitting in the doorway of her circular stone house where the light is strongest, her fingers moving with the sure rhythm of someone who has found the perfect marriage between mind and hand. She works not from written patterns, but from memory, from knowledge passed down through countless generations of mothers and daughters, each adding their own innovations to the ancient traditions while preserving the essential techniques that make such beauty possible. Her loom is simple, made of wood grown in the cloud forest itself, its frame worn smooth by the hands of many weavers. But in her hands, this simple tool becomes an instrument capable of creating complexity that rivals the most sophisticated modern machinery. Thread by thread, row by row, she builds not just fabric, but meaning, not just covering, but culture, not just beauty, but the very identity of her people woven into permanent form. As the day progresses and the mountain light shifts through its cycle of brilliance and shadow, you begin to notice other treasures that fill this simple dwelling. Pottery vessels of such elegant proportion that they seem to define grace itself, their surfaces decorated with patterns that echo the textile designs while adding their own vocabulary of beauty. These are not the rough containers of a people struggling to survive in a harsh environment, but the refined creations of artists who understood that even the most utilitarian objects could carry transcendent beauty. The clay itself was gathered from specific deposits known only to the potters, earth that had been blessed by altitude and weather into the perfect consistency for shaping. But it was the shaping itself that transformed mere clay into art. Hands that knew the secret of creating walls so thin they seemed almost transparent, yet strong enough to hold the precious water that sustained life at these heights. Fingers that could coax clay into curves that pleased the eye while serving the practical needs of storage and preparation. Each pot was fired in kilns built into the very stones of the fortress, chambers where the alchemical transformation of clay into ceramic took place under carefully controlled conditions that had been perfected across centuries of experimentation. The firing itself was ceremony as much as craft, a collaboration between human skill and elemental forces that sometimes produced vessels so beautiful they seemed to glow with their own inner light. But perhaps the most moving artifacts of Chachapoya daily life are those that speak most directly across the centuries to our own hearts. Small objects that reveal the tender humanity of people who lived their lives among the clouds. A wooden comb carved with the same precision brought to the greatest architectural works, its teeth worn smooth by hair that disappeared into dust 600 years ago. A child's toy, whittled from mountain cedar, its form suggesting a bird in flight, its surface polished by small hands that once found joy in its simple beauty. These intimate objects remind us that the builders of the great fortress were also parents who sang lullabies to children, afraid of the wind howling through the mountain passes, partners who held each other close during the cold nights when mist turned to ice on the stone walls. individuals who found moments of private happiness even in the midst of the grand communal effort of building and maintaining their impossible city in the sky. In the corners of the house, stored in ceramic vessels sealed against the mountain dampness, you would find the other treasures of Chachapoya life. Seeds saved from the best harvests, each variety carefully maintained across generations. Genetic libraries that preserved the agricultural wisdom necessary for farming at altitudes where most crops would fail. Medicines gathered from plants that grew only in the cloud forest, their healing properties discovered through centuries of careful observation and experimentation. Dyes and pigments prepared for the next season's weaving, each color representing hours of gathering, processing, and preparation. And everywhere, woven through every aspect of daily life, was the aesthetic sensibility that made the Chachapoya unique among the peoples of the ancient Andes. Beauty was not luxury to them, not an addition to life once the necessities were secured, but an integral part of survival itself. They understood intuitively what modern people often forget, that human beings do not live by bread alone, that the soul requires beauty as much as the body requires nourishment, that creating lovely things is itself a form of prayer. As evening approaches in this imagined day among the cloud warriors, as the mist thickens around the fortress walls and the temperature begins its nightly drop toward the edge of tolerance, you find yourself understanding something profound about how they lived. They created beauty not despite the harsh conditions of their mountain home, but because of them. In an environment that demanded everything from them, that challenged their every breath and tested their endurance with each change of weather, they chose to respond with art. Their textiles became more complex, their pottery more refined, their personal objects more carefully crafted precisely because life itself was so demanding. Beauty became their answer to hardship, art their response to the sublime indifference of the mountain landscape. In choosing to live among the clouds, they had also chosen to live as artists, as people who understood that the human spirit requires more than mere survival, that even in the most challenging circumstances, perhaps especially in the most challenging circumstances, the creation of beauty becomes an act of defiance against despair, a declaration that human beings are capable of transcending their circumstances through the power of their imagination and the skill of their hands. Sleep comes gently now to the inhabitants of this high fortress, and as you imagine yourself settling into rest, wrapped in textiles of impossible beauty, surrounded by objects that transform utility into art, you begin to understand that the Chachapoya were warriors not only in the martial sense, but in the deeper sense of being people who fought daily battles against the forces that would reduce human life to mere survival, who won those battles by refusing to accept that beauty was expendable, that art was luxury, that the creation of lovely things was anything less than essential to the preservation of the human soul. Let your breathing deepen as we move from the intimate spaces of home and hearth into the larger story of a people who earned their name as warriors, yet fought their battles with a grace and strategy as refined as their textiles, as precisely crafted as their pottery. The same hands that wove beauty into cloth and shaped clay into art also wielded weapons with deadly skill, protecting the cloud realm they had claimed as their own against all who would take it from them. But do not imagine crude warfare, brutal and chaotic battles fought without thought or strategy. The Chachapoya were warriors as they were artists, bringing to combat the same aesthetic sensibility, the same mathematical precision, the same deep understanding of their environment that characterized every aspect of their culture. They fought like the mist itself, appearing suddenly where they were not expected, striking with devastating effect, then vanishing back into the cloud forest as if they had never been there at all. Picture yourself now standing on the walls of Kuélap as dawn breaks through the mountain mist, watching as warriors prepare for battle with the same careful attention to detail that their weavers brought to their looms. Each weapon is not merely functional, but beautiful, crafted with the understanding that tools of war, like all human creations, should reflect the dignity and skill of their makers. Bronze-headed spears with shafts of highland wood, their balance perfect, their points sharp enough to pierce the finest armor. Clubs weighted with star-shaped heads, designed not just to crush, but to do so with elegant efficiency. But their most distinctive weapons were their slings, simple in appearance, yet devastating in effect. Woven from the same alpaca fibers used in their finest textiles, these slings could hurl stones with accuracy that would challenge modern firearms. In the hands of warriors who had grown up throwing rocks at birds in the thin air of high altitude, who understood intuitively how projectiles behaved in the reduced atmosphere of their mountain realm, these humble weapons became instruments of precision warfare. Watch now as the morning mist begins to clear, revealing the approach of enemies across the valleys below. But the Chachapoya do not wait passively behind their walls like besieged victims. They understand their environment too well, know too intimately every path and passage through their mountain territory to limit themselves to defensive warfare. Instead, they become part of the landscape itself, warriors who move through the cloud forest like spirits, using the mist as camouflage, the difficult terrain as ally, the very altitude that challenges their enemies' lungs as weapon. They descend from their fortress not as a visible army marching in formation, but as shadows moving through the fog, individual fighters who know every stone, every tree, every depression in the ground that might provide cover or concealment. This is warfare adapted to their unique environment, strategy born from intimate knowledge of a landscape that exists nowhere else on Earth. The enemy below, whether Inca armies marching up from the southern valleys or rival tribes pressing in from the eastern jungles, find themselves fighting not just human opponents, but the mountain itself. The thin air that the Chachapoya breathe as easily as other people breathe at sea-level leaves, invaders gasping, their movements slowed, their thinking clouded by altitude sickness. Paths that seem clear and navigable suddenly reveal themselves as traps, leading to cliff faces or dead ends where Chachapoya warriors wait in perfect ambush. But listen closely to the sounds of this mountain warfare, and you will hear something unexpected. The battle cries that echo through the mist are not the savage roars of barbarian hordes, but calls that seem almost musical, coordinated shouts that serve as communication as much as intimidation. These warriors fight with discipline, with coordination, with the same attention to pattern and rhythm that characterizes their weaving and their architecture. They have perfected the art of appearing where they are not expected, of striking precisely where their enemies are weakest, then melting away into the mist before counterattacks can be organized. It is warfare as choreography, violence as poetry, destruction as carefully planned and beautifully executed as the creation of their finest textiles. The Spanish chroniclers who later tried to understand and describe Chachapoya military tactics struggled to find words for what they had witnessed. These were not warriors in the European sense, not knights charging in formation or infantry advancing in disciplined ranks. Instead, they fought like the elements themselves, like wind and mist given human form and deadly purpose. One moment, the mountain paths would be empty. The next, they would be filled with warriors who seemed to materialize from the very stones. An enemy column would find itself surrounded without ever seeing their opponents approach, attacked from directions that seemed impossible given the terrain. Yet for all their skill in warfare, for all their success in defending their mountain realm, the true genius of Chachapoya military strategy lay not in their ability to destroy enemies, but in their capacity to avoid unnecessary destruction. They understood that the greatest victory was not the one that left the most bodies scattered across mountain slopes, but the one that convinced enemies to seek easier targets elsewhere, to leave the cloud realm in peace to pursue its own extraordinary destiny. This wisdom was born from their environment as much as their temperament. In a landscape where every resource was precious, where the effort required to transport supplies to high-altitude settlements was enormous, where the replacement of losses in population was always a challenge, warfare had to be as efficient as possible, as economical in its costs as it was effective in its results. So they perfected the art of psychological warfare, of making themselves appear more numerous than they were, more dangerous than any rational calculation of risk would justify. They became masters of timing, of choosing exactly when to reveal themselves and when to remain hidden, when to attack and when to simply watch as enemies exhausted themselves climbing paths that led nowhere, struggling through mist that concealed nothing but more mist. Their reputation grew with each successful defense of their territory. Stories spread through the Andes of the ghost warriors who lived among the clouds, who could disappear into thin air, who fought with weapons blessed by mountain spirits, who knew secret paths through terrain that existed on no maps. These stories became weapons in themselves, deterrents that often accomplished what actual combat might have required at much greater cost. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Chachapoya warfare was how completely it reflected their understanding of themselves and their place in the world. They fought not as conquerors seeking to expand their territory or impose their will on distant peoples, but as guardians of a sacred space, protectors of a way of life that existed nowhere else and could exist nowhere else. Their battles were fundamentally defensive, efforts to preserve rather than to acquire, to maintain rather than to expand. They had found in their cloud realm something worth defending with their lives. And they defended it with the same passion and skill they brought to every other aspect of their existence. They were warriors in the deepest sense, people willing to fight for what they valued most. But their fighting was always in service of preservation, of maintaining the extraordinary culture they had built among the clouds. Even in victory, even after battles that left their enemies scattered and demoralized, the Chachapoya showed the same restraint that characterized their approach to resource management and environmental stewardship. They took what they needed from the defeated, but they did not pursue total destruction. They understood that in the mountains, today's enemy might be tomorrow's trading partner, that survival at high altitude sometimes required cooperation even with former adversaries. This wisdom would serve them well in the centuries to come, as larger and more powerful forces began to take notice of their mountain kingdom. The same strategic thinking that allowed small numbers of Chachapoya warriors to defeat much larger invading forces would eventually lead them to make calculated alliances with enemies who were too powerful to defeat through force alone. But tonight, as we rest in the imagined safety of their fortress walls, listening to the gentle sound of mist moving through stone corridors, we can appreciate the Chachapoya warriors at the height of their power, masters of their mountain realm, guardians of a civilization that had learned to thrive in the spaces between earth and sky. They sleep now with the satisfied exhaustion of those who have successfully defended what they love most, their weapons cleaned and stored with the same care they give to their looms and pottery wheels, ready for whatever challenges tomorrow's dawn might reveal through the mountain mist. In their dreams, they are not conquerors, but protectors, not destroyers, but preservers. Warriors whose greatest victories were measured not in enemies defeated, but in the continuation of their extraordinary way of life, in the preservation of their ability to wake each morning in a realm where clouds drift past their windows like slow white rivers flowing toward eternity. Let your breathing slow even further now as we enter a chapter of profound change, a time when the mountain mists began to carry whispers of transformation from the southern valleys, when the horizon that had always held only clouds and distant peaks began to shimmer with the approach of an empire unlike any the Andes had ever known. Feel yourself standing once again on the great platform of Kuélap, but now the air carries something different. A tension that speaks of endings and beginnings intertwined like threads in the most complex of textiles. The year is sometime in the middle of the 15th century, though the Chachapoya mark time not by numbers, but by the rhythm of seasons, by the generations of children who have grown to adulthood within these stone walls, by the accumulation of stories that pile like morning mist in the valleys of memory. Yet even in their mountain isolation, even wrapped in the protective embrace of clouds and altitude, they have begun to hear tales that drift upward from the trade routes below, like smoke from distant fires. There is a new power rising in the south. The traders whisper as they rest in the stone houses of Kuélap, catching their breath in the thin air, sharing news along with their wares of coastal shells and jungle feathers. These southern people call themselves the Inca, and they speak not of conquest in the usual sense, not of the crude subjugation that mountain peoples have always feared from the valley dwellers, but of something far more ambitious and far more seductive: the creation of a single world, a unified realm that will stretch from the desert coasts to the jungle depths, from the southernmost valleys to these very cloud forests of the north. Picture the Chachapoya leaders gathering in council as these reports accumulate like snowfall, each new account adding weight to the growing certainty that their world of splendid isolation is coming to an end. They meet in one of the circular structures that crown the platform of Kuélap, their voices low and measured, their words chosen with the same care they bring to the placement of stones in their walls. These are not hasty people, not given to panic or precipitous action. They have survived in their impossible mountain realm by learning to think in terms of generations, to make decisions that will serve not just the immediate moment, but the long arc of their people's future. What they hear about this Inca empire troubles them not because it sounds barbarous or destructive, but because it sounds so reasonable, so civilized, so much like what any rational people might choose if offered the choice freely. The Inca do not simply crush their enemies and leave ruins behind. Instead, they absorb, they incorporate, they transform conquest into something that almost resembles invitation. They come bearing gifts of knowledge and technique, offering membership in something greater than any individual tribe or kingdom has ever achieved. They bring with them innovations that even the sophisticated Chachapoya must admire. Engineering techniques that can carve roads through terrain that has never known human passage. Agricultural methods that can coax abundance from soil that has barely sustained subsistence. Administrative systems that can coordinate the activities of millions of people across distances that challenge imagination. They offer not just peace, but prosperity, not just survival, but participation in a grand design that promises to remake the entire world. And yet, as the Chachapoya councils continue through the long nights when mist wraps around their fortress like the dreams of sleeping mountains, they struggle with questions that have no easy answers. What would it mean to become part of this Inca world? Would they remain Chachapoya, people of the clouds, weavers of impossible textiles, and builders of mountain fortresses? Or would they become something else, citizens of an empire so vast that their unique identity might disappear like morning mist burned away by a sun too bright to resist? The debates that fill those circular council chambers reflect the wisdom of people who understand that some choices, once made, cannot be unmade. They have watched smaller neighboring peoples face the approach of Inca armies, have seen some resist and be destroyed, others submit and be transformed beyond recognition. They have heard stories of mountain fortresses emptied, their populations relocated to valleys where they can be more easily administered, their ancient ways gradually forgotten as new customs take their place. But they have also heard other stories, tales of peoples who found ways to negotiate with the expanding empire, to maintain something of their own character while gaining access to the resources and knowledge that membership in the Inca world provides. These stories speak of a different kind of conquest, one that seeks not to eliminate local traditions, but to weave them into a larger tapestry, creating unity without destroying uniqueness. As seasons pass and the Inca presence grows stronger in the valleys below, the Chachapoya find themselves facing a reality that all their military skill, all their knowledge of mountain warfare, cannot change through force alone. The Inca are not just another tribe seeking to expand their territory. They are the representatives of a new kind of power, one that grows not just through conquest, but through the irresistible logic of organization, efficiency, and scale. The decision, when it finally comes, reflects the same strategic wisdom that has allowed the Chachapoya to survive and thrive in their challenging mountain environment. They choose not defiance that would lead to destruction, nor surrender that would lead to absorption, but something more subtle, more in keeping with their character as people who have always found ways to live between extremes, to make homes in spaces that exist between easy categories. They choose accommodation, but accommodation on their own terms. When Inca envoys finally climb the paths to Kuélap, they are received not as conquerors, but as guests, welcomed with the elaborate courtesy that the Chachapoya reserve for significant occasions. The negotiations that follow are conducted with the same attention to detail, the same appreciation for complexity and nuance that characterizes all Chachapoya arts. What emerges from these talks is an arrangement that allows the Chachapoya to maintain their mountain homes, their traditional crafts, their essential identity as cloud people, while providing the Inca Empire with what it needs most from them: their unparalleled knowledge of mountain warfare, their skills as fighters who can move through difficult terrain like spirits, their understanding of how to survive and thrive at altitudes where most peoples would perish. The Chachapoya warriors, who had once defended their mountain realm against all invaders, now become elite units in the Inca military. Specialist fighters valued precisely for the unique skills that their cloud forest homeland has taught them. They march with Inca armies to distant battlefields, carrying their distinctive weapons and tactics, to wars fought in landscapes they have never seen, always with the understanding that their service earns their people the right to remain in their mountain kingdom, to continue their ancient ways under the protective umbrella of imperial power. It is a compromise that satisfies neither the most traditional Chachapoya, who would prefer to maintain complete independence, nor the most ambitious Inca administrators, who would prefer complete integration. But it is a compromise that works, that allows both peoples to gain what they need while preserving what they value most. The Chachapoya keep their clouds, their fortress, their textiles, their identity. The Inca gain access to military skills and mountain knowledge that no other people can provide. Yet even as this accommodation brings peace and a kind of prosperity, even as Chachapoya goods begin to appear in markets throughout the vast Inca realm, and Inca innovations find their way into Chachapoya daily life, there remains an underlying tension, a recognition that this balance depends on forces beyond anyone's complete control. The Chachapoya have preserved their way of life, but they have also made themselves dependent on the continued stability and benevolence of an empire that spans half a continent. In the quiet moments of evening, when the daily business of life in the cloud fortress has settled into peaceful routine, the older inhabitants sometimes gather to tell stories of the time before, when their people answered to no authority but their own wisdom, when their warriors fought only to defend their own mountain paths, when their fate was determined by their own choices rather than by the calculations of distant imperial administrators. But these are not bitter stories, not tales of loss and mourning. They are told with the same gentle acceptance that characterizes all Chachapoya responses to the challenges of their environment. Just as they learn to live with mist and altitude, with the constant threat of weather and the difficulty of mountain agriculture, they learn to live with the reality of imperial inclusion, finding ways to maintain their essential character within circumstances they cannot completely control. And in truth, many aspects of Inca inclusion prove beneficial to Chachapoya life. The roads that Inca engineers carve through previously impassable terrain make trade easier, bringing new materials and ideas to the mountain workshops where Chachapoya artisans continue to create their masterworks. The administrative systems that coordinate activities across the empire provide markets for Chachapoya textiles and pottery that extend far beyond anything their ancestors could have imagined. Most importantly, the Inca respect for local expertise means that Chachapoya knowledge is not just preserved but valued, not just tolerated but actively sought. Their techniques for high-altitude agriculture are studied and adapted for use in other mountain regions of the empire. Their architectural innovations influence construction projects throughout the Andes. Their artistic traditions are recognized as among the finest achievements of their age. The Chachapoya discover that membership in the Inca world does not require the abandonment of everything that makes them unique. Instead, it offers opportunities to share their gifts with a wider world, while learning from the accumulated wisdom of dozens of other peoples who have also found their place within the vast imperial tapestry. As you imagine yourself settling into sleep in this transformed but still recognizable mountain realm, you can feel the complex emotions of a people navigating profound change with characteristic grace and wisdom. There is loss here, the loss of absolute independence, of the simple clarity that comes from answering only to one's own community and one's own conscience. But there is also gain, access to knowledge and resources that make life more secure, opportunities to influence a wider world, the satisfaction of seeing one's own traditions valued and respected by people who have the power to destroy or preserve them. The mist still rises from the valleys, as it has for countless centuries, still wraps around the stone walls of Kuélap with the same gentle persistence, still carries the scents of cloud forest flowers and the sounds of mountain streams. The essential rhythms of Chachapoya life continue unchanged. The daily work of weaving and pottery, the seasonal cycles of planting and harvest, the eternal conversation between human ingenuity and mountain environment. What has changed is the horizon of possibility, the sense of being part of something larger than themselves, the knowledge that their choices now ripple outward through networks of relationship and obligation that stretch far beyond the comfortable boundaries of their mountain kingdom. They have become citizens of two worlds: the intimate world of cloud and stone that has always been their home, and the vast imperial world that offers both opportunities and dangers they are still learning to navigate. In their dreams tonight, Chachapoya children see not just the familiar paths of their mountain realm, but distant cities and foreign landscapes where their parents' craftsmanship is valued, where their cultural heritage contributes to something unprecedented in human history. A civilization that spans an entire continent while still finding room for the unique gifts of its smallest and most remote communities. They sleep peacefully, these people of the clouds, wrapped in textiles that now carry patterns influenced by artistic traditions from across the empire, living in stone houses that incorporate architectural innovations learned from Inca engineers, eating foods grown with techniques that blend ancient Chachapoya wisdom with imperial agricultural science. They have found a way to change without losing themselves, to grow without abandoning their roots, to join a larger world while remaining true to their essential nature. And in the depths of their rest, in the place where dreams touch the eternal mysteries that hover always at the edges of human understanding, they prepare for changes yet to come, for challenges that will test their capacity for adaptation even more severely than the rise of the Inca Empire. For on the horizon, still invisible but approaching with the inevitability of dawn, comes news of bearded strangers from across the Western Sea, bearing gifts and diseases in equal measure, carrying in their ships the seeds of transformations that will reshape not just the Inca world, but the entire human story of the Americas. Breathe slowly now, as slowly as the mountain mist that carries strange new scents on morning breezes, as slowly as the measured footsteps of messengers climbing paths that have never known such urgent news. The year is 1532, though time itself seems to move differently now, compressed and accelerated by events that unfold with the speed of avalanches. Changed forever by the arrival of men whose very existence challenges every assumption the peoples of the Andes have ever made about the world and their place in it. Feel yourself standing once more on the familiar stones of Kuélap, But now the air carries vibrations that speak of upheaval in the ordered world below. The great Inca Empire, that vast and seemingly eternal structure that has defined the political reality of the Andes for generations, trembles like a mountain slope before an earthquake. Word travels up the ancient pathways in fragments and whispers. Strange men with pale skin and hair on their faces, riding beasts larger than llamas, carrying weapons that speak with thunder and spitfire, demanding tribute in yellow metal that they value more than life itself. The first Chachapoya to see these strangers are warriors serving in Inca armies far from their mountain home. Men who have traveled to distant battlefields as part of their people's obligation to the empire. They return to Kuélap with eyes that have seen marvels and horrors in equal measure, voices that struggle to find words for experiences that exist outside the vocabulary of their ancestral language. Listen to their reports as they gather in the circular council chambers of the great fortress, their words measured and careful, for they understand that what they have witnessed marks the end of one age and the beginning of another. They speak of men who seem to be part animal, until it becomes clear that they sit astride creatures no Andean has ever imagined. Four-legged beasts that carry their riders with speed that makes mountain paths seem as level as lake surfaces. They describe weapons that roar like thunder and kill at distances that make spears and slings seem like children's toys. Armor that turns aside the sharpest bronze points as if they were grass stems brushing against stone. But most unsettling of all, they report a hunger in these strangers that goes beyond any rational need, a desire for gold that drives them to acts of destruction that serve no purpose except the accumulation of metal that they can neither eat nor wear nor use for any practical purpose. Yet, in the midst of these alarming reports, the returning warriors also bring news that offers hope to Chachapoya leaders struggling to understand how their people might navigate this new and dangerous world. These Spanish, as they call themselves, are not simply destroyers. They are, in their own strange way, builders of alliances, seekers of local partnerships that might serve their incomprehensible purposes. And most importantly, for the Chachapoya, they appear to be enemies of the Inca Empire that has both protected and constrained mountain life for the past century. Picture the debates that fill the council chambers during the long nights when mist thickens around the fortress walls. Debates that echo with the voices of leaders who must make choices that will determine the survival or destruction of their people. The same strategic wisdom that guided their ancestors' decisions about Inca accommodation now faces challenges infinitely more complex and dangerous. Some voices call for the traditional Chachapoya response to external threats, withdrawal into the cloud forest, reliance on their superior knowledge of mountain warfare, faith that altitude and mist will protect them as they have always protected the cloud people from unwelcome intrusions. Others argue that this new threat is unlike any they have faced before, that these Spanish possess technologies and motivations that render traditional defensive strategies obsolete. But a third voice emerges from these discussions, a voice that speaks with the characteristic Chachapoya appreciation for complexity and nuance. What if, these speakers suggest, the arrival of the Spanish offers an opportunity rather than just a threat? What if their people's ancient resentments against Inca domination, carefully suppressed for generations of accommodation, might find expression through alliance with these powerful strangers? The decision, when it comes, reflects both the pragmatic wisdom and the tragic miscalculation that will define this moment in Chachapoya history. Messengers descend from Kuélap carrying offers of alliance to Spanish leaders who can barely pronounce Chachapoya names, who understand nothing of mountain culture or cloud forest wisdom, who see in these skilled warriors only instruments for their own purposes of conquest and enrichment. The alliance that results brings immediate benefits to the Chachapoya cause. Spanish weapons and tactics, combined with Chachapoya knowledge of Inca vulnerabilities and Andean geography, prove devastatingly effective against imperial forces. The mountain warriors who had served reluctantly in Inca armies now fight with passionate commitment alongside Spanish conquistadors, their ancient skills in mountain warfare finally unleashed in service of what they believe to be their own liberation. Watch as Chachapoya guides lead Spanish columns through paths that Inca forces never suspected existed, as mountain fighters who know every stone and stream in their territory help foreign allies strike at imperial supply lines and communication networks. The same mist that had once concealed Chachapoya defensive positions now hides combined Spanish Chachapoya forces as they move against targets throughout the northern Andes. For a brief and intoxicating moment, it seems as if the gamble has succeeded brilliantly. Inca power crumbles with shocking speed. The great empire that had seemed eternal revealing itself to be as fragile as morning frost when subjected to pressures it had never been designed to withstand. Spanish weapons and Chachapoya tactics proved to be a combination that no traditional Andean military force can resist. But even as these early victories unfold, even as Chachapoya leaders congratulate themselves on their strategic acumen, the true nature of their new alliance begins to reveal itself in ways that no amount of mountain wisdom could have anticipated. The Spanish, it becomes clear, are not interested in replacing Inca hegemony with Chachapoya independence. They are interested in replacing Inca administration with Spanish administration, Inca tribute systems with Spanish tribute systems, Inca control with Spanish control. The gold that drives Spanish actions with such inexplicable intensity comes not just from Inca treasuries, but from mines that require workers, from streams that need panning, from temples that hold sacred objects whose spiritual value means nothing to men who see only the material from which they are made. And the workers for these enterprises, the hands needed to extract wealth from Andean earth, must come from somewhere. The Chachapoya discover, with growing horror, that their alliance with the Spanish has not freed them from imperial obligations, but has simply exchanged one set of masters for another, and that their new masters possess appetites and methods that make Inca administration seem benevolent by comparison. The accommodation that had allowed them to maintain their essential identity while serving Inca purposes proves impossible to replicate with Spanish overlords who understand nothing of Andean values and care nothing for local traditions. Worse still, the very skills that had made them valuable allies in the destruction of Inca power now make them dangerous to Spanish interests. Warriors who know every mountain path, who can appear and disappear like mist, who possess detailed knowledge of Spanish tactics and capabilities, represent potential threats that Spanish administrators cannot afford to ignore. The same strategic thinking that once viewed Chachapoya military expertise as an asset now sees it as a liability to be contained. The final tragedy of the Spanish alliance reveals itself gradually, like morning mist clearing to reveal a landscape transformed beyond recognition. The Chachapoya, in helping to destroy the Inca Empire, have also destroyed the political and economic systems that had allowed their own survival at high altitude. The roads that carried trade to their mountain markets, the administrative networks that coordinated resources across vast distances, the military structures that had provided employment for their warriors. All of these disappear along with the empire they helped to topple. In their place comes a colonial system that has no use for mountain fortresses, no interest in cloud forest crafts, no patience for the complex accommodations that had allowed Andean peoples to maintain their distinctive identities within larger political structures. The Spanish approach to administration is simpler and more brutal: submission or destruction, with no middle ground for negotiation or accommodation. As you imagine yourself now in the quiet darkness of Kuélap during these final years of independence, you can feel the weight of realization settling over the fortress like the heaviest mountain mist. The Chachapoya leaders who had believed themselves to be securing their people's freedom through Spanish alliance now understand that they have instead helped to forge the chains of their own enslavement. Yet even in this darkest hour, even as the full scope of their miscalculation becomes clear, the essential Chachapoya character asserts itself. There is no panic, no descent into despair or recrimination. Instead, the same careful deliberation that has guided their decisions for centuries now focuses on the question of how to preserve whatever can be preserved from the wreckage of their hopes. The conversations that fill the council chambers now are not about victory or alliance, but about survival and continuity. How much of their culture can be hidden from Spanish eyes? Which traditions can be practiced in secret? What knowledge can be passed to children who will grow up in a world unrecognizably different from the one their parents have known? In the end, the Spanish alliance proves to be the final chapter in the story of Chachapoya independence, but it is not the final chapter in the story of the Chachapoya people. For even as their political autonomy disappears, even as their mountain fortress falls under foreign control, even as their warriors find themselves transformed from proud allies into reluctant laborers, something essential persists. The mist still rises from the valleys each morning, still wraps around familiar stone walls, still carries the scents and sounds that have marked the rhythm of mountain life for centuries beyond counting. And in that continuity of landscape, in the eternal conversation between clouds and peaks, between mist and stone, the Chachapoya find resources for endurance that no conquistador can understand or destroy. They sleep tonight, these people of the clouds, with the bitter knowledge of betrayal and the sweet certainty of survival intermingled in their dreams. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new forms of accommodation with forces beyond their control. But tonight, in the darkness where all possibilities remain open, they rest as they have always rested, as people who have learned to find hope in the spaces between certainty and despair, who have made their home in the realm where endings and beginnings merge like morning mist, rising toward the infinite sky. Let your breathing become even deeper now, as deep as the ancient mysteries that sleep in the stone foundations of Kuélap, as profound as the questions that whisper through mountain mist like voices from ages beyond memory. For as we have journeyed through the known chapters of Chachapoya history, we have only begun to touch the edges of enigmas that continue to puzzle scholars, to challenge archaeologists, to invite dreamers into realms where fact dissolves into wonder and scientific investigation merges with the deepest forms of human curiosity. Close your eyes more completely now, and feel yourself descending, not through layers of earth, but through layers of mystery, each level revealing new questions, new possibilities, new invitations to wonder about truths that may lie forever beyond the reach of definitive answers. The Chachapoya, even in their absence, continue to speak to us through riddles written in stone and bone, through architectural anomalies and artistic achievements that seem to exceed what should have been possible given the constraints of their time and place. Picture yourself standing now in the laboratory of a modern archaeologist, surrounded by artifacts that have emerged from the mist-wrapped ruins, like messages from another world. Here, under bright fluorescent lights that would astonish any ancient Chachapoya, lie the physical remnants of lives lived among the clouds, each object a fragment of a larger puzzle that grows more complex rather than simpler with each new discovery. On one table rest skulls that tell stories more mysterious than any fiction. These are the bones of the cloud warriors themselves, and they whisper secrets that challenge our understanding of ancient American populations. Many of these skulls are larger than the average for Andean peoples, supporting the historical accounts that describe the Chachapoya as unusually tall. But some display characteristics that seem to align more closely with populations from distant parts of the world than with their immediate neighbors in the Andes. Feel the quiet excitement of researchers as they measure cranial features, analyze bone density, extract DNA from teeth that last tasted mountain air centuries ago. The results of these studies speak in statistical whispers of possibilities that stretch the imagination. Genetic markers that suggest connections to populations separated by vast oceans. Bone chemistry that tells of diets and environments that don't quite match the expected patterns of Andean highland life. Could some of the Chachapoya have descended from peoples who crossed the Pacific in vessels we can barely imagine, guided by navigation techniques that left no written records? The ocean currents and trade winds that flow between the islands of Polynesia and the coasts of South America would have made such journeys possible for navigators with sufficient skill and determination. The cultural similarities between certain Chachapoya artifacts and objects found on distant Pacific islands hint at connections that conventional archaeology struggles to explain. But move deeper into these modern laboratories, and you will find even more tantalizing mysteries. Textile fragments that display weaving techniques unknown anywhere else in the ancient Americas, patterns that seem to encode mathematical relationships of staggering complexity. Under microscopic examination, these ancient fabrics reveal secrets that challenge our assumptions about the technological capabilities of pre-Columbian peoples. The dyes used in these textiles, when subjected to chemical analysis, reveal sources and processes that extend far beyond the cloud forests of the northern Andes. Pigments derived from minerals found only in specific geological formations, plant extracts that require processing techniques of remarkable sophistication, color-fast properties that modern science struggles to replicate using traditional materials. Each thread speaks of trade networks that connected the Chachapoya to resources scattered across a continent, of knowledge systems that preserved complex technical information across generations without the aid of written texts. Watch now as archaeologists carefully excavate the circular foundations that dot the platform of Kuélap, their trowels and brushes revealing layer after layer of accumulated mystery. Beneath the floors of houses last occupied 5 centuries ago lie older floors, and beneath those, older still, creating stratigraphic records that stretch back through time like geological formations compressed into human-scaled spaces. But what these excavations reveal challenges linear assumptions about cultural development and technological progress. In some of the deepest layers, archaeologists find artifacts that display greater sophistication than those found in more recent levels, suggesting periods of cultural flourishing followed by decline and partial recovery. Stone tools that show evidence of techniques that were apparently forgotten and later rediscovered. Pottery fragments that display artistic achievements that subsequent generations never equaled. Even more puzzling are the structures themselves, the mysterious circular towers that rise from the fortress platform like stone prayers offered to incomprehensible gods. Detailed architectural analysis reveals construction techniques that seem to exceed the capabilities usually attributed to peoples without metal tools or wheeled transport. Joints fitted with tolerances measured in millimeters, weight distributions calculated with precision that suggests knowledge of engineering principles not formally codified until centuries later. Some of these towers show evidence of having been built around wooden frameworks that were subsequently removed, leaving hollow cores whose purpose remains entirely enigmatic. Were these chambers designed for storage, for ceremony, for astronomical observation, or for purposes so alien to our modern understanding that we lack even the vocabulary to speculate about their function? The acoustical properties of these structures add another layer to the mystery. When wind moves through them at certain angles, they produce musical tones of remarkable purity, harmonics that seem intentionally designed rather than accidentally achieved. Could the Chachapoya have understood principles of sound and resonance that allowed them to create architecture that was simultaneously functional and musical? Did they build their mountain fortress to sing with the voice of the wind itself? But perhaps the most haunting mysteries lie not in what the Chachapoya left behind, but in what they seem to have taken with them when they departed. Oral traditions preserved among the scattered descendants of cloud forest peoples speak of knowledge that was deliberately hidden rather than lost, of secrets that were concealed from Spanish eyes and passed down through bloodlines that maintained their silence across centuries of colonial rule. These whispered traditions speak of astronomical knowledge that mapped celestial cycles unknown to European science of the time, of agricultural techniques that could coax abundance from the most marginal mountain soils, of medicinal practices that drew healing compounds from plants that grow only in the specific microenvironments of the cloud forest. Knowledge that was deemed too valuable and too dangerous to preserve in forms that conquerors might discover and exploit. Some of these traditions hint at even more extraordinary possibilities. Stories passed from generation to generation speak of Chachapoya builders who understood the secret of making stones so precisely fitted that they became, in essence, single structures rather than assemblages of separate blocks. Techniques that allowed relatively small populations to move and place stones that would challenge modern heavy machinery. Methods that worked with, rather than against, the natural properties of the materials they employed. The astronomical alignments built into Kuélap and other Chachapoya sites reveal knowledge of celestial mechanics that seems remarkably sophisticated for a people who left no written records of their observations. Structures oriented not just to obvious phenomena like solstices and equinoxes, but to more subtle celestial events, the rising of specific star systems, the complex cycles of planetary movements, the long-term patterns of precession that unfold across centuries and millennia. Could the Chachapoya have developed systems of mathematical astronomy that rivaled those of the Maya or the ancient Babylonians? Did their cloud wrapped mountain kingdom serve as an observatory from which priest astronomers tracked celestial events with precision that influenced agricultural and ceremonial cycles throughout their region? The botanical mysteries surrounding Chachapoya sites add yet another dimension to these puzzles. Plants found growing in the ruins of their settlements include species that should not exist at those elevations, varieties that appear to be the products of selective breeding programs that would have required centuries of patient cultivation. Did the Chachapoya possess agricultural knowledge that allowed them to adapt crops to environments where they should not have been able to survive? Some of these plants display characteristics that seem to blend properties from species separated by thousands of miles, as if ancient botanists had somehow managed to cross pollinate varieties that conventional botany insists could never have encountered each other naturally. Seeds found in sealed storage jars retain viability after centuries of preservation, suggesting preservation techniques that modern science struggles to understand. As you rest now in the comfortable darkness, surrounded by these swirling questions and tantalizing possibilities, you begin to understand that the true mystery of the Chachapoya may not lie in what we don't know about them, but in how much we may never know. Each answer leads to new questions. Each solved puzzle reveals the edges of larger enigmas. Each scientific discovery opens doorways into realms where conventional knowledge provides inadequate maps. Perhaps this is fitting for a people who chose to make their home in the realm between earth and sky, who built their civilization in the spaces where certainty gives way to mystery, where the solid becomes ethereal, where human understanding must learn to embrace the unknown as gracefully as it grasps the known. The Chachapoya continue to teach us across the centuries that separate their time from ours, that some of life's most profound truths exist not in the answers we can prove, but in the questions we have the courage to ask. In your dreams tonight, you may find yourself walking through laboratories where scientists work with reverent patience to decode messages written in stone and bone, in weaving patterns and astronomical alignments, in the very atoms that compose artifacts created by hands that new secrets we are still struggling to rediscover. These modern seekers, like the ancient peoples they study, understand that the most important discoveries often come not from finding definitive answers, but from learning to ask better questions, from developing the capacity to wonder with greater sophistication and deeper humility. The mysteries of the Chichapoya remind us that human knowledge, however advanced it becomes, will always encounter horizons beyond which lie territories that challenge our assumptions, that invite us to expand our understanding, that humble our certainty while inspiring our curiosity. In this, they offer us gifts as precious as their textiles and as enduring as their stone constructions. They teach us that wonder is not the enemy of knowledge, but its most faithful companion, that mystery is not the absence of truth, but its most sublime expression. Breathe now with the rhythm of centuries, slow and deep as the accumulation of wisdom that settles like sediment in the quiet places of the heart. As we have journeyed through the mist-wrapped world of the Chachapoya, as we have walked their stone paths and touched the edges of their mysteries, we begin to understand that their greatest legacy may not lie in the fortresses they built or the textiles they wove, but in the way they remembered how to live. Let your mind settle now into the deepest quiet, the place where ancient voices speak not in words, but in the wordless language of lived truth, of wisdom earned through generations of patient attention to what matters most in human existence. For the cloud warriors, in choosing to make their home between earth and sky, learned secrets that our modern world has largely forgotten, truths that whisper to us across the centuries like wind moving through high mountain passes. Picture yourself in the council chambers of Kuélap during one of those long evening gatherings when the day's practical business has ended and conversation turns to the deeper questions that have no urgent answers, only patient exploration. The elders speak in voices seasoned by altitude and experience, their words carrying the weight of knowledge distilled from countless seasons of watching clouds form and dissolve, of observing how life adapts and thrives in places that seem impossible for human habitation. What they remembered, first and most fundamentally, was how to live in harmony with limitation rather than in spite of it. The thin air that challenged every breath, the steep slopes that made level ground precious beyond measure, the mists that concealed as much as they revealed. These were not obstacles to be overcome, but teachers to be honored, partners in the ancient dance between human intention and natural law. In our modern world of seemingly limitless resources and technological solutions, we have largely forgotten this wisdom of working with, rather than against the constraints that define our existence. We exhaust ourselves fighting battles that need not be fought, spending energy trying to eliminate difficulties that might instead be transformed into sources of strength and insight. The Chachapoya understood intuitively what modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover, that human beings often find their greatest fulfillment not in the absence of challenges, but in rising to meet challenges that call forth their deepest capabilities. They chose to live at altitudes that demanded excellence in every aspect of daily life, in an environment that forgave no carelessness, no waste, no failure to attend to the subtle requirements of survival among the clouds. But this attention to limitation was balanced by an equally profound understanding of abundance, not the crude abundance of endless accumulation, but the refined abundance that comes from learning to see richness in what others might dismiss as scarcity. In a landscape where level ground was rare, they learned to see beauty in the vertical, to find in steep slopes and narrow ridges opportunities for architectural innovations that would have been unnecessary and therefore undiscovered on gentler terrain. Listen now to what their textiles teach us about this philosophy of creative limitation. Working with a relatively small palette of available materials, cotton from the valleys, alpaca wool from the highlands, dyes extracted from carefully tended plants and insects. They created works of art that rival anything produced with the vast resources available to modern industry. They proved that richness comes not from having infinite choices, but from exploring infinite possibilities within chosen constraints. This wisdom extends far beyond the realm of material culture into the deeper territories of social organization and spiritual understanding. The Chachapoya developed forms of community life that acknowledged both individual excellence and collective interdependence, creating societies where personal achievement served communal flourishing rather than competing with it. In their workshops, master weavers passed their knowledge to apprentices not as competitors who might someday challenge their supremacy, but as inheritors who would carry forward traditions that belonged to the community rather than to any individual. The most skilled artisans found their fulfillment not in hoarding their techniques, but in seeing them grow and evolve in the hands of the next generation. This understanding of knowledge as a communal rather than private possession reflects a deeper wisdom about the nature of human achievement. The Chachapoya remembered what we have largely forgotten, that individual brilliance flowers most fully when it is rooted in communal support, that personal excellence serves its highest purpose when it contributes to the well-being of the whole community. Their architecture embodies this philosophy in stone. The great fortress of Kuélap required the coordinated labor of generations, a project so vast that no individual could hope to see it completed within a single lifetime. Yet people contributed their best efforts to its construction with the understanding that some forms of achievement transcend the boundaries of individual existence, that the most meaningful human projects are those that connect us to something larger than ourselves. In our age of hyper-individualism, when success is often measured by what sets us apart from others rather than what connects us to them, the Chachapoya offer a different model of human flourishing. They remembered that strength comes not from independence, but from interdependence skillfully practiced. That security lies not in accumulating enough resources to live without community, but in building communities strong enough to support all their members through whatever challenges may arise. Perhaps most importantly, the Cloud Warriors remembered how to live with mystery as a friend rather than as an enemy to be defeated. In a landscape where mist concealed as much as it revealed, where the familiar could become unknown in the space of a single weather change, they learned to find comfort in uncertainty, to make decisions with incomplete information, to build their lives on foundations that acknowledged the provisional nature of all human knowledge. This comfort with mystery extended into their spiritual understanding, creating religious practices that honored questions as much as answers, that found the sacred not only in what could be clearly seen and understood, but also in what remained forever beyond the reach of human comprehension. They built their ceremonies around the recognition that human beings are part of larger patterns that exceed our ability to map completely, participants in stories whose full meaning may never be revealed. Their astronomical observations, encoded in the alignments of their buildings and the patterns of their textiles, reflect not a desire to predict and control celestial movements, but a wish to participate more fully in cosmic rhythms, to align human activity with forces larger than human intention. They sought not to master the universe, but to find their proper place within it, to live in harmony with cycles and patterns that connect earthly existence to celestial grandeur. In our modern relationship with the natural world, we have largely lost this sense of humble participation in favor of technological dominion. We seek to control weather rather than to adapt to it, to eliminate seasonal variations rather than to find beauty in their rhythms, to reduce natural complexity to manageable simplicity rather than to develop the wisdom necessary for living gracefully within complexity. The Chachapoya remembered that human beings are not separate from nature, but expressions of it, not masters of the environment, but participants in ecological relationships that require constant attention and adjustment. Their agricultural practices, their architectural choices, their artistic traditions all reflect deep understanding of how human culture can enhance rather than diminish the natural systems that sustain all life. This ecological wisdom carries profound implications for how we might address the environmental challenges of our own time. The Chachapoya demonstrate that it is possible to create sophisticated, beautiful, meaningful human cultures that work with rather than against natural limitations, that find abundance within sustainability, that achieve excellence through cooperation rather than competition. As you rest now in the imagined comfort of their mountain realm, breathing air scented with cloud forest flowers, surrounded by the gentle sounds of mist moving through stone corridors, you can feel these ancient teachings settling into your own understanding, like seeds carried on mountain winds, taking root in the deeper soil of the heart where true wisdom grows. The Chachapoya remembered how to live as if beauty mattered, as if community was sacred, as if the unknown was friend rather than enemy, as if human life was part of larger patterns that deserved respect and attention. In remembering these truths themselves, they offer them to us across the centuries as gifts more precious than gold, more enduring than stone, more beautiful than the finest textiles ever woven by human hands. Tonight, as sleep approaches like evening mist settling over familiar valleys, these ancient teachings prepare to accompany you into the realm of dreams, where all wisdom ultimately takes root, where the deepest learning happens not through effort, but through the gentle acceptance of truth that recognizes itself as eternal, as present in every breath, as close as the beating of your own heart. Close your eyes now and let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of ancient winds that still whisper through the cloud forests of Peru. Feel yourself drifting, not into sleep just yet, but into something deeper, something that transcends the boundaries of time itself. You have been here before. Perhaps not in this lifetime, but in the endless dance of consciousness that connects all things, you have walked these misty pathways. The stone steps beneath your feet remember you. The walls of Kuélap have felt the warmth of your hand against their weathered surfaces. The clouds that embrace these mountains have carried your breath, your dreams, your hopes across centuries. Picture yourself now, not as you are tonight in your comfortable bed, but as you were then. The morning mist clings to your skin as you emerge from your circular stone dwelling high above the world below. Your feet know these paths without looking. They have traced these routes 10,000 times before, worn smooth by generations of your people, the Sachapuyos, the people of the clouds. You are not a stranger here. You belong to this place as surely as the orchids that bloom in hidden valleys, as surely as the spectacled bears that lumber through bamboo groves in the early dawn. This is your home, and it has always been your home, stretching back through lifetimes you cannot quite remember, but somehow know in your bones. Feel the cool mountain air fill your lungs. It tastes of freedom, of height, of secrets kept safe among the peaks. The altitude that would challenge visitors feels natural to you, for your blood runs thick with the adaptation of centuries. Your chest rises and falls with the easy rhythm of someone born to thin air and endless sky. The terraces stretch out before you in the growing light, carved into impossible slopes by hands guided by wisdom older than memory. You helped build these terraces, stone by stone, working alongside your neighbors in the communal way that has always been your people's strength. Your hands shaped the very earth you now survey, creating gardens in the sky where maize and quinoa would grow despite the challenging altitude. As you walk the familiar path toward the great fortress of Kuélap, you feel the presence of your ancestors walking beside you. They are not gone, not really. In this place where time moves differently, where the mist blurs the boundaries between past and present. They are as real as the ground beneath your feet. Their wisdom flows through you. Their courage strengthens your step. Their love for this land beats in rhythm with your heart. The massive walls of Kuélap rise before you like a dream made stone. But you know it is no dream. You remember the day they laid the first stones, how the entire community gathered to bless the foundation. You remember the years of building, each generation adding their strength to the work, creating something that would endure long after the last of you had returned to the earth. Your fingers trace the joints between the massive stones, feeling for the places where your own hands helped guide them into position. The craftsmanship is impeccable, fitted so precisely that not even a knife blade could slip between them. This is your legacy, built not for conquest or glory, but for protection, for community, for the preservation of a way of life that honors both earth and sky. You climb the ancient stairway, your muscles remembering the motion, your body moving with the fluid grace of someone who has made this journey countless times. Each step takes you higher, not just in elevation, but in connection to something eternal. The mist swirls around you, and for a moment you cannot tell where you end and the clouds begin. You are part of this landscape, woven into its very essence. From the highest platform of Kuélap, you look out over your domain. The cloud forest stretches in all directions, a sea of green broken by silver ribbons of rivers far below. Condors ride the thermals with wings spread wide, and you feel a kinship with them, these other masters of the high places. Like them, you belong to the sky as much as to the earth. You remember the stories your grandmother told you as a child, sitting in the doorway of your home as the evening mist rolled in. Stories of the first people who came from the east following the path of the morning star. Stories of heroes who could speak to the wind, of healers who drew their power from the sacred springs hidden in the mountains. These stories live in you still, part of the unbroken chain that connects you to the very beginning of your people. The responsibilities of your life in the clouds feel natural on your shoulders. You are a guardian of this place, a keeper of the old ways. When outsiders occasionally find their way to your hidden realm, it is you and others like you who decide whether they come in peace or threat. Your judgment is sharp, honed by generations of wisdom, passed down through bloodlines that stretch back to the time when the world was young. You remember the ceremonies held in the sacred spaces of Kuélap, when your people would gather to honor the changing seasons, to give thanks for good harvests, to ask the mountain spirits for protection. Your voice joined with hundreds of others in songs that echoed off the stone walls and seemed to reach up into the very heavens. Those melodies still resonate in these stones, waiting to be awakened by the right touch, the right heart. The textile you wear was woven by hands that knew you before you were born, patterns that carry meanings deeper than words. The geometric designs tell stories of your lineage, of your clan's journey through time, of your connection to the natural world around you. Every thread is a prayer, every color a remembrance, every pattern a pathway home. You feel the presence of your children around you, though they are grown now with children of their own. You taught them as you were taught, not with harsh commands, but with patient example. You showed them how to read the signs in the sky that tell of coming weather, how to find the plants that heal and the places that hold power. This knowledge flows through them as it flowed through you, an unbroken river of understanding. The weight of your responsibilities never felt heavy because it was shared. Every member of your community carried part of the burden, and every achievement was celebrated by all. When the harvest was good, everyone feasted. When times were difficult, everyone shared what little there was. This is how your people survived in their mountain sanctuary for centuries, not through conquest, but through cooperation, not through domination, but through harmony. As the day moves toward evening, you find yourself at the edge of a cliff, looking out over the valley far below. The mist is rising from the forest, beginning its nightly journey up the mountainside. Soon, it will embrace you once again, wrapping you and your city in its protective shroud. You have seen this sight every day of your life, yet it never fails to fill you with wonder. You understand something that the modern world has forgotten. You know that you are not separate from this landscape, not a visitor or conqueror, but a part of it as integral as the trees or the stones. The mountain feeds you, shelters you, protects you, and in return, you tend it with the devotion of a caring parent for a beloved child. This relationship, ancient and sacred, flows in your veins like blood. The sounds of your community drift up from the terraces below. Children laughing, women singing as they work, men discussing the day's tasks. These are the sounds of a people at peace, secure in their mountain fortress, confident in their way of life. You have helped create this peace through your vigilance, your wisdom, your willingness to stand guard over what matters most. Tonight, as you prepare to stay in your stone home high above the world, you carry with you the satisfaction of a life well lived. You have been a good steward of the trust placed in you by your ancestors. You have passed on their wisdom to your children, preserved their ways for future generations, kept the sacred flames burning even when outside winds threatened to extinguish them. The stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, the same constellations your people have watched for generations beyond counting. You know their stories, their seasonal movements, their messages about when to plant and when to harvest, when to travel and when to stay home. This celestial calendar guides your life as it guided your ancestors, connecting you to rhythms far older than any human civilization. As sleep approaches, you feel the presence of all those who came before you and all those who will come after. You are a link in an unbroken chain, a carrier of light in an endless relay race of consciousness. The wisdom you hold, the love you bear for this place, the courage that flows through your veins, these things are eternal, passed down through countless lifetimes, destined to continue long after your current form returns to the earth. You were there in that time of mist and mystery, of stone cities that touched the clouds, of people who knew how to live in harmony with forces greater than themselves. Part of you has never left those high places, and part of those high places has never left you. In the deepest chambers of your heart, you are still walking those ancient paths, still breathing that sacred air, still carrying the wisdom of the cloud warriors into whatever dreams await you in the gentle darkness of this night. The mist rises around you one more time, soft and welcoming, carrying you gently into the place where all stories converge, where all memories are kept safe, where you will always be home. The morning light filters through your window now, but in your mind's eye, you are still standing among the ancient stones of Kuélap, feeling the eternal mist on your face. This is how memory works, how the past and present dance together in the quiet moments before sleep. The Chachapoya may have vanished from history's stage centuries ago, but their legacy lives on, whispering through the cloud forests of Peru like voices carried on the mountain wind. In the modern world, far from the peaceful rhythm of your evening routine, there are people who dedicate their lives to keeping these ancient voices alive. Archaeologists work patiently in the thin air of the Andes, brushing dirt from pottery shards with the same reverence a monk might show handling sacred texts. Each fragment tells a story. Each broken wall speaks of lives lived fully in harmony with an impossible landscape. Dr. Maria Reina, a Peruvian archaeologist whose own ancestors may have known the Cloud Warriors, spends her days piecing together the puzzle of Chachapoya civilization. She works not with the haste of treasure hunters, but with the patient devotion of someone who understands that some truths can only be uncovered slowly, respectfully, like morning mist gradually revealing the mountains it has hidden through the night. The site of Kuélap itself tells a story of both loss and preservation. For centuries after the Spanish conquest, the great fortress lay forgotten, swallowed by vegetation and obscured by the very mists that had once protected its builders. Vines crept over the massive walls, trees took root in the courtyards, and the cloud forest began the slow process of reclaiming what had always belonged to it. But forgetting and being forgotten are different things. The local people, descendants of various Andean cultures, never entirely lost their connection to the high places. They knew where the old paths led, even when those paths were choked with growth. They carried stories passed down through generations, fragments of memory wrapped in legend, kept alive around cooking fires and in quiet conversations between elders and children. When explorers and archaeologists finally began to take serious notice of Kuélap in the modern era, they found not an empty ruin, but a site watched over by guardians who had never truly left. Local families had maintained an informal stewardship, keeping the memory alive even when the wider world had moved on to other concerns. The work of preservation is delicate, requiring a balance between protection and access, between scholarship and respect for indigenous perspectives. Every decision must be weighed carefully. How much tourism can the site sustain without damaging the very structures that draw visitors? How can modern techniques be used to strengthen ancient walls without destroying their authenticity? How can the story be told without losing its essential mystery? The Chachapoya left behind no written language that scholars have yet been able to decipher, but they communicated in ways that transcend words. Their architecture speaks of community cooperation on a massive scale. Their art reveals a deep spiritual connection to the natural world. Their burial practices suggest about death and afterlife that honored both individual identity and collective continuity. The famous sarcophagi, those haunting funeral sculptures that still watch over remote cliff faces, present perhaps the most poignant reminder of Chachapoya beliefs about memory and permanence. Carved to resemble the deceased, these guardians were placed in positions where they could eternally observe their homeland. Even in death, the cloud warriors maintained their vigil, watching over valleys and peaks with stone eyes that would never close. Modern conservation efforts work to protect these cliffside monuments from the elements and from human interference. Teams of specialists rappel down sheer rock faces to apply conservation treatments, working in conditions that would challenge even the most experienced mountaineers. Their dedications mirrors that of the ancient artists who originally placed these sculptures in their impossible locations, driven by purposes that transcended mere convenience or safety. The textiles recovered from Chachapoya sites reveal another dimension of their legacy, woven with skills that modern craftspeople struggle to replicate. These ancient fabrics display patterns that encode information about social status, family lineage, and spiritual beliefs. Each thread was placed with intention, each color chosen for meaning that extended far beyond mere decoration. Contemporary weavers in the region, many of them indigenous women whose techniques stretch back through unbroken lineages, study these ancient patterns with both professional interest and personal connection. They recognize elements that still appear in their own work, motifs that have survived the centuries by being passed from mother to daughter, from teacher to student, in an unbroken chain of creative tradition. The plants used to create the dyes for these ancient textiles still grow in the cloud forests, though many of the specific preparation techniques had to be rediscovered through careful experimentation and consultation with traditional knowledge keepers. The deep reds, brilliant yellows, and rich blues that once adorned Chachapoya nobles can be recreated today, but only through processes that require intimate knowledge of the local ecosystem and its seasonal rhythms. Educational programs now work to ensure that this traditional knowledge is not lost again. Schools in the region incorporate textile arts into their curriculum, teaching children not just the technical skills of weaving, but the cultural significance of the patterns they create. These young people become bridges between past and future, carrying forward traditions while adapting them to contemporary contexts. The agricultural terraces that once fed the cloud warriors present another conservation challenge. Many of these engineering marvels remain functional after more than 5 centuries, their carefully constructed drainage systems still managing water flow with efficiency that impresses modern hydraulic engineers. Local farmers continue to use some terraces, growing traditional crops using methods that have changed little since pre-Columbian times. Research into Chachapoya farming techniques has revealed sophisticated understanding of microclimates, crop rotation, and soil management. Their agricultural knowledge was precisely adapted to the challenging conditions of cloud forest agriculture, where rainfall is abundant but unpredictable, where temperatures can vary dramatically over short distances, and where the growing season is dictated by complex interactions between altitude, weather patterns, and seasonal changes. Contemporary agricultural scientists study these ancient systems not as curiosities, but as potential solutions to modern challenges. Climate change and population pressure are creating agricultural crises around the world, and the sustainable practices developed by people like the Chachapoya offer insights that could prove invaluable for future food security. The Chachapoya understanding of their environment extends beyond mere exploitation to a relationship based on reciprocity and respect. They took from the land what they needed, but gave back through careful stewardship, ritual offerings, and practices that maintained ecological balance. This worldview, preserved in fragmentary form among their cultural descendants, offers perspectives that modern environmental science is only beginning to appreciate fully. Museums around the world now house Chachapoya artifacts, but there is growing recognition that these objects are most meaningful when understood in their original context. Collaborative projects between international institutions and local communities work to ensure that the descendants of the Cloud Warriors maintain access to their ancestral heritage while also sharing it with the broader world. Digital technology plays an increasingly important role in preservation efforts. Three-dimensional scanning techniques create precise records of architectural features before they deteriorate further. Virtual reality experiences allow people to walk through reconstructed Chachapoya settlements without physically impacting the fragile sites. Online databases make scholarly research available to indigenous communities that had been excluded from academic discussions of their own heritage. The story of Chachapoya rediscovery is also a story about changing attitudes toward indigenous knowledge and rights. Early archaeological work often proceeded without meaningful consultation with local communities, treating ancient sites as scientific resources rather than sacred places with living cultural significance. Contemporary approaches emphasize collaboration, ensuring that descendant communities have voice in how their ancestral sites are studied, preserved, and presented to the world. This shift reflects broader changes in how we understand the relationship between past and present. The Chachapoya are not merely subjects for academic study, but ancestors whose wisdom remains relevant to contemporary challenges. Their sophisticated adaptation to mountain environments, their sustainable agricultural practices, their emphasis on community cooperation over individual accumulation. These approaches offer alternatives to patterns of modern life that have proven problematic. Young people from the Amazonian regions of Peru, many of them from indigenous backgrounds, increasingly pursue careers in archaeology and anthropology, bringing perspectives shaped by cultural traditions that maintain stronger connections to pre-Columbian worldviews. Their research often focuses on questions that traditional academic approaches overlooked, investigating spiritual practices, ecological relationships, and social structures that can only be understood through frameworks that honor indigenous ways of knowing. The conservation of Chachapoya heritage sites also creates economic opportunities for local communities through responsible tourism, craft production, and cultural education programs. These initiatives work to ensure that preservation efforts benefit the people who live in the region today, creating incentives for continued stewardship while respecting the sacred nature of ancestral sites. Visitors who journey to Kuélap today often report profound emotional responses to the experience. Standing among walls built by hands that have been dust for centuries, looking out over valleys that have changed little since the cloud warriors walked these paths, many people feel a connection that transcends mere historical interest. The site seems to awaken something ancient in the human spirit, a recognition of our shared capacity for creating beauty, meaning, and community even in the most challenging circumstances. As night settles over the modern world, the mist still rises in the cloud forests of Peru, just as it has for countless centuries. The ancient paths remain, though they are overgrown. The sacred springs still flow, though few remember their names. The wisdom of the cloud warriors lives on, not only in museums and scholarly papers, but in the land itself, in the practices of their descendants, and in the hearts of all who choose to remember that there are ways of living that honor both human needs and the natural world that sustains us all. And so we come to the end of our journey through the mists of time. Though, like all true endings, this one is also a beginning. As you settle deeper into the comfort of your bed, feeling the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders, the Cloud Warrior's story continues to whisper around you, soft as the mountain winds that still caress the peaks of Peru. The Chachapoya understood something that we, in our hurt modern world, sometimes forget. They knew that some stories are too large to be contained within the boundaries of a single lifetime, too important to be held by just one generation. These are the stories that flow like mist through the valleys of memory, touching every heart that is open to receive them, awakening recognition in souls that have traveled far from their mountain homes. Tonight, as you close your eyes, you carry within you the echo of stone walls built to last forever, the memory of hands that shaped terraces on impossible slopes, the wisdom of people who learned to live in harmony with clouds and sky. These are not merely historical facts to be filed away in the dusty corners of your mind. They are living truths, seeds of ancient wisdom that can bloom in any heart willing to tend them. The mist that once protected Kuélap still rises each evening from the Amazon basin, climbing the mountainsides with the same patient determination it has shown for millennia. It knows no borders, recognizes no divisions between past and present. In its cool embrace, all times become one time, all stories become part of the same eternal narrative of human hope, struggle, and transcendence. Perhaps tonight in your dreams, you will find yourself walking those ancient pathways again. Perhaps you will feel the stone steps worn smooth by countless feet. Breathe the thin air that tastes of freedom. Hear the voices of people who understand that true strength comes not from conquest, but from community, not from domination, but from cooperation with the forces that shape our world. The cloud warriors built their cities not to impress future archaeologists or to leave monuments to their own power, but to create spaces where their children could grow safely, where their elders could pass on wisdom, where their community could flourish in balance with the magnificent and challenging landscape they called home. In doing so, they created something far more lasting than mere stone and mortar. They created a vision of what human civilization could be when it flows in harmony with natural rhythms rather than fighting against them. This vision lives on wherever people choose cooperation over competition, wherever communities gather to face challenges together, wherever human hands work to heal rather than harm the earth that sustains us all. The Chachapoya legacy is not confined to museum displays or archaeological sites. It breathes in every garden tended with love, in every community that chooses to care for its most vulnerable members, in every decision to think 7 generations ahead rather than seeking only immediate gain. As the last light fades from your day, imagine yourself as part of this continuing story. You too are a guardian of ancient wisdom, a keeper of dreams that stretch back to the dawn of human consciousness. The same stars that guided Chachapoya astronomers shine down on you tonight. The same moon that reads their ceremonies casts its gentle glow through your window. The same eternal questions that stirred their hearts echo in your own. How shall we live? What shall we leave behind? How can we honor both our human needs and the sacred web of life that holds us all? The answers come not in grand pronouncements, but in the quiet choices of daily life, in moments of kindness that ripple outward like circles on still water, in the courage to stand for what matters even when no one is watching. The Cloud Warriors' greatest strength was not their military prowess or their architectural achievements, but their understanding that individual well-being and community health are inseparable, that human flourishing and environmental balance must dance together in eternal partnership. Let this understanding settle into your bones as sleep approaches. Feel yourself held not just by the comfort of your bed, but by the vast web of connection that links you to all who have ever gazed up at the night sky and wondered about their place in the great mystery of existence. You are part of an unbroken chain of consciousness that stretches from the first human who ever looked up at the stars to the last who will remember the stories we tell tonight. The mist rises now around your thoughts, soft and welcoming, carrying away the sharp edges of worry and anxiety, leaving only the essential truths that matter. Love endure. Kindness multiplies, beauty persists even in the darkest times. Communities can flourish when their members choose to care for each other and for the world they share. In the cloud forests of Peru, condors still ride the mountain thermals with wings spread wide against infinite sky. Ancient springs still flow from sacred mountains, their waters carrying minerals and memories older than human language. The stones of Kuélap still stand in patient vigil, holding space for dreams and stories yet to be born. These places continue because they were built not just with stone and mortar, but with love, dedication, and vision that transcended the brief span of individual lives. The Cloud Warriors knew they were creating something for the future, something that would outlast their own footsteps on the mountain paths. In your own life, in your own quiet way, you too are part of this eternal building project, adding your stone to walls that will shelter generations not yet born. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let yourself be crawled by this knowledge. You are not alone in your struggles or your hopes. Across centuries and continents, human hearts have beaten with the same dreams that stir in your chest. The courage that carried the Chachapoya through impossible challenges flows in your veins too. The wisdom that taught them to live in harmony with their world whispers in your dreams as well. Sleep comes now like morning mist ascending from hidden valleys, gentle and inevitable, carrying you toward the place where all stories converge, where all dreams are held safe until it is time to wake and begin again. In that place of perfect rest, you will find yourself welcomed by all who have ever sought to live with honor, to love with courage, to build something beautiful in the face of uncertainty. The Cloud Warriors are with you still, not as ghosts from a vanished past, but as living presence in the eternal now where all true stories live. Their whispers join the chorus of wind through leaves, of water over stone, of hearts beating in rhythm with forces too vast for human understanding, yet intimate enough to call home. Rest now, knowing that the mist will rise again tomorrow, that the mountains will stand firm in their ancient patience, that somewhere in the world, people are still choosing kindness over cruelty, cooperation over conflict, love over fear. Rest knowing that your life, quietly however lived, adds its light to the constellation of human hope that has guided travelers through dark times for countless generations. The story never truly ends. It only transforms, passing from voice to voice, from heart to heart, from dream to dream. Tonight, you become part of its telling. Tomorrow, you will carry it forward in ways you cannot yet imagine. For now, let it carry you gently into sleep, wrapped in mist and starlight, held safe in the knowledge that some truths are too beautiful to die, too important to be forgotten, too deeply woven into the fabric of existence to ever truly fade away. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler. The Cloud Warriors watch over you still, guardians of the ancient pathways that always lead toward home.